It was a bright, sunny morning at Lincoln Middle School. The playground was alive with the sounds of children laughing, calling to each other and running across the field. Birds chirped in the trees and the air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass. Among the students, a group of older kids, known for their pranks and teasing, were huddled near the swings, whispering and laughing. Their eyes often wandered to the edge of the playground, where a new teacher had been assigned. This teacher was different from anyone the students had met before. His posture was straight, his steps precise, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. Rumors had already begun spreading about him. Some said he had been in the military. Others claimed he was a retired tomb guard, someone who had stood watch at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Few students fully understood what that meant, but they could sense that he commanded respect without trying. The group of older kids, led by a boy named Jason, decided it would be funny to play a trick on him. Jason was tall for his age, with a mischievous grin and a knack for finding trouble. He whispered to his friends, "Watch this. We'll trip him when he walks past. He'll fall flat on his face and everyone will laugh." His friends nodded eagerly, excited at the thought of embarrassing the quiet, serious teacher. They hid a piece of string between the two benches near the playground's edge. As the teacher approached, they held their breath, ready to pull it at just the right moment. Other students noticed the tension and turned their heads, curious about what was about to happen. Some of the younger children felt uneasy, sensing that this was not a harmless joke. The teacher walked slowly, his eyes scanning the playground as if he were observing everything carefully. He smiled briefly at a group of younger students who waved at him, but his focus remained calm and steady. Jason reached for the string, trying to time it perfectly. His heart raced with excitement. Just as the string was about to trip him, the teacher's foot landed gracefully, his body straight and balanced. The string slipped harmlessly under his shoe. For a moment, the playground went completely silent. The students couldn't believe what had just happened. The teacher hadn't stumbled at all. Jason's grin faltered. He blinked, confused. Did he just not trip?" he whispered to his friend. The teacher stopped a few steps ahead, turned slightly, and looked directly at the group. His eyes were calm, but there was a depth to them that made the bullies uneasy. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear either. It was something else, something that made the students feel small and foolish without a single word being said. The teacher walked over slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "I saw what you tried to do," he said in a quiet, firm voice. "I want you to think about what you were doing and why." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The bullies shifted uncomfortably, feeling a strange mix of guilt and embarrassment. No one had ever spoken to them like that before, calm, direct, and without yelling. He continued, "Sometimes people try to hurt others because they think it is funny. But every action has a consequence. You may not see it right now, but even small actions can hurt someone or make them feel unsafe. It takes strength to stand up, and it takes courage to act with respect." The students looked at each other, their bravado fading. They had expected laughter, chaos, or even a shout from the teacher. They didn't expect a lesson, and they certainly didn't expect to feel so small under the calm, steady gaze of someone who had clearly seen far more than they ever could. One of Jason's friends, a boy named Leo, whispered, Maybe we shouldn't have done that." Jason didn't respond. He was still staring at the teacher, unsure of how to react. He had always been the one in control, the one who made jokes at other people's expense, but now he felt awkward and exposed. The teacher didn't rush away. Instead, he took a few steps closer, his presence commanding attention without any effort. He bent slightly to meet the eyes of the students, speaking in a tone that was kind but firm. "I understand that you may not have intended serious harm, but pranks that target others can teach the wrong lesson. True strength is not about making someone fall or laugh at them. True strength is about helping, guiding, and lifting others up." Some students began to fidget, feeling a twinge of guilt. Others looked down at their shoes, unable to meet his gaze. A few of the younger students on the side watched in awe, whispering to each other about how calm and strong the teacher seemed. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Jason finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. We didn't mean any real harm." The teacher nodded slightly. "I know you didn't, but intentions are not enough. Actions matter. Remember that." He paused, giving them a moment to reflect. It is easy to mock or play tricks, but it is much harder to show respect and honor in everyday actions. Every day gives you a chance to do something right, and every day gives you a choice. The bullies didn't know what to say. The words weren't threatening. They weren't punishment. They were a challenge to think differently, to act differently, and maybe to grow into better people. For the first time in a long time, Jason felt unsure of himself. The usual thrill of causing mischief seemed hollow, compared to the quiet confidence and wisdom of the teacher standing before him. A few minutes later, the teacher walked away, heading toward the school building. He didn't shout, he didn't demand apologies, but the students were left in thoughtful silence. Some began to whisper to each other about how unfair it felt, how they had intended to be clever but ended up feeling humbled instead. Others simply watched him, trying to understand the calm authority he carried. By the end of the day, the story of what happened spread through the school. Even students who hadn't seen the incident heard about it, and many were curious to meet this remarkable teacher. Some were inspired, thinking about their own actions and whether they had treated others with respect. Others quietly decided they would avoid trying similar tricks in the future. In the weeks that followed, the teacher became more than just a staff member. He became a role model, someone whose calm strength and thoughtful words encouraged students to act with integrity. And for the group of bullies, the lesson of that sunny morning lingered in their minds. They had tried to trip someone for a laugh, but instead, they had met a person who taught them the real meaning of strength, respect, and honor. The playground, once a place of chaos and laughter at others' expense, began to feel a little different. There was a sense of awareness, a quiet respect for actions and consequences and for the people around them. The tomb guard, who had entered their lives in the most ordinary way, simply walking to class, had managed to make an extraordinary impression, one that would be remembered long after the laughter of that morning had faded. After the incident on the playground, the days at Lincoln Middle School seemed quieter in a different way. The students who had tried to trip the teacher felt a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. They had not expected their prank to fail, and they certainly had not expected to feel so humbled by someone their own age or just slightly older. Jason, Leo, and the rest of the group found themselves thinking about the teacher more often than they would admit, wondering why he had not yelled or punished them, but instead spoken with calm authority. The teacher, whose name was Mr. Harris, noticed the change immediately. He was not someone who enjoyed attention, but he had a way of observing people quietly, understanding what they needed without forcing them to show it. He knew that many of the older students were seeking attention, trying to assert themselves in ways that sometimes caused trouble. He also knew that anger or punishment would only make them resist. What they needed was guidance, patience, and an example they could respect. One morning during homeroom, Mr. Harris asked the class to gather around for a brief discussion. The students were curious but cautious. They remembered the incident on the playground and wondered what he would say. Some of the bullies shifted nervously in their seats, unsure if this was another moment of confrontation. Mr. Harris began quietly. I want to tell you a story about something that happened to me many years ago. When I was younger, I had to stand guard at a very important place. It was a place where people came to remember and honor those who had given everything for others. My job was simple in description but very hard in practice. I had to be alert, disciplined, and respectful, no matter the weather or distractions. The students leaned forward, intrigued. The quiet tone of Mr. Harris's voice made the story feel serious and important. Even Jason found himself paying attention. I learned something very important during that time, Mr. Harris continued. It is easy to laugh at someone, to play tricks, or to try to prove you are stronger than someone else. But real strength comes from controlling yourself, acting with respect and understanding how your actions affect others. The smallest choices can make a big difference. He paused, letting the words sink in. Some students looked down at their desks while others stared at him with wide eyes. Mr. Harris did not scold them. He simply spoke with a sense of honesty and care that made it impossible to ignore. Yesterday, he said, glancing around the classroom, some of you tried to play a trick on me. I will not lie. I was aware of what you were doing. But instead of reacting with anger, I chose to show you the lesson that I had learned long ago. I wanted you to understand that actions matter more than intentions, and that strength is measured by character, not by who can trip someone or make someone feel small. There was a moment of silence. Jason's mind was spinning. He had expected laughter, teasing, or punishment, but instead he felt something new: respect, mixed with a strange kind of guilt. He knew Mr. Harris was right. The trick had not been funny, it had been mean-spirited. And somehow Mr. Harris's calm response had shown him a better way to act. One of the students in the back, a quiet girl named Emily, raised her hand. "Mr. Harris," she asked, "how do you stay so calm even when someone tries to trick you or annoy you?" Mr. Harris smiled gently. "It is not always easy," he said. "But when you think about the bigger picture, it becomes clearer. Every person deserves respect. Every action has a consequence. If I had reacted with anger, I would have only added negativity to the situation. Instead, I tried to guide you to understand the value of discipline, patience, and honor." The students were listening more closely now. They could feel the sincerity in his words. Some whispered to each other, realizing they had never thought about these things before. The playground, the laughter, the pranks, they had all seemed harmless. But Mr. Harris had helped them see that even small actions could affect others in ways they might not expect. Jason, still sitting at the front, felt a knot of guilt in his stomach. He wanted to say something, but he wasn't sure what. Finally, after a few moments, he raised his hand. "Mr. Harris," he said quietly, I'm sorry for what we did. We didn't think it would matter, but now I see it was wrong." Mr. Harris nodded, his expression kind and patient. "Thank you for saying that, Jason. Apologizing takes courage. It shows that you are learning and growing. Remember, every day is a chance to choose the right path, even when it is not easy." The classroom felt different after that conversation. The students, especially the ones who had been planning mischief, began to think about their actions more carefully. They noticed the way Mr. Harris treated everyone with fairness and respect, regardless of what they had done. It was inspiring. It was powerful. And it made them wonder if they could act in the same way. In the following weeks, small changes began to appear. The bullies were quieter, more thoughtful. They still laughed and played, but they were no longer targeting others for amusement. Some students started helping their peers, offering support in ways they had never considered before. Even the younger children noticed the difference and felt safer and happier on the playground. Mr. Harris never forced the changes. He simply continued to act with integrity, setting an example that spoke louder than any punishment could. He was present, observant, and patient, and his actions slowly shaped the atmosphere of the school. His presence reminded students that real strength was not about teasing or showing dominance, but about kindness, respect, and standing firm in one's values. One day, during recess, Jason approached Mr. Harris. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Not just for letting us off, but for teaching us something important." Mr. Harris smiled and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're welcome. Just remember, the lesson doesn't end with me. You have the chance to make good choices every day. That is where real strength comes from." That moment stayed with Jason. He realized that he wanted to be someone who inspired respect, not fear. He wanted to make choices that would help others rather than harm them. And he wanted to carry that lesson with him, long after middle school ended. Over time, the story of the tomb guard teacher spread quietly among students and staff. Teachers noticed the change in behavior, and students began to share the lessons they had learned from him. It was a ripple effect. One calm, thoughtful response to a prank created a wave of reflection, growth, and understanding across the school. By the end of the term, the playground, once dominated by teasing and mischief, had become a place of respect, laughter, and shared responsibility. The bullies had transformed into leaders in their own way, guiding younger students with care and helping them understand the importance of integrity. And through it all, Mr. Harris continued his quiet work, proving that one person's calm wisdom could change many lives. By the following term, Lincoln Middle School felt different. The playground, which had once been a stage for pranks and mischief, was now filled with a sense of order, respect, and careful attention. Students moved with more awareness, not because they were afraid of rules or punishment, but because they had learned a deeper lesson about respect, responsibility, and the power of actions. Jason and his group of friends, once notorious for their teasing, were the most changed. They no longer sought ways to embarrass or intimidate others. Instead, they began to notice how their words and actions affected the people around them. The sense of thrill they had once found in pranks had been replaced by something stronger: the quiet satisfaction of making the right choice, helping others and being seen as trustworthy by their peers. One day during lunch, Jason watched as a younger student struggled to carry a stack of books. Without hesitation, he rushed over to help. He remembered Mr. Harris's words, the idea that real strength was in lifting others up rather than putting them down. The younger student's face lit up with gratitude, and for the first time, Jason felt the joy of acting with kindness. The influence of Mr. Harris extended far beyond the bullies he had directly confronted. Students across different grades began to talk about him in hushed, admiring tones. Teachers noticed subtle shifts in behavior. Students listened more attentively, treated one another with courtesy, and helped resolve conflicts without anger. The quiet presence of the tomb guard teacher had created a ripple effect that reached every corner of the school. One afternoon, the principal called an assembly. The gymnasium buzzed with anticipation as students and teachers filled the seats. Parents were also invited, curious to see what the gathering was about. Mr. Harris was asked to speak about respect, discipline, and the lessons he had shared with his students. Standing on the stage, he looked out at the audience, calm and composed. "I want to share something very simple," he began. "Every action you take has a consequence, and every choice matters. You may not always see it immediately, but the way you treat others leaves an impression, sometimes forever. It is easy to laugh at someone or play tricks, but it takes courage to act with integrity, patience, and kindness." Jason listened, remembering the day he had tried to trip Mr. Harris. He thought of the calm, steady voice and the way the teacher had turned a moment of mischief into a lesson that changed him. He glanced at his friends and saw that they were all reflecting, realizing how much they had grown over the past months. Mr. Harris continued, "You have the ability to inspire change, to lift people up, and to create a better environment wherever you go. Real strength is not in causing harm. It is in guiding, supporting, and showing courage in your decisions every day." The audience was silent, captivated. Parents whispered to each other about how extraordinary it was to see such a meaningful lesson shared with children in such a gentle yet powerful way. Teachers nodded, impressed by the transformation in the students and the influence of one teacher's calm presence. After the assembly, many students approached Mr. Harris. Some thanked him for teaching them something important. Others simply smiled, realizing that he had shown them a way to act in life that was stronger than any prank or game. Jason was among them. He shook Mr. Harris's hand and said, "Thank you for everything. I didn't understand it before, but now I do. You really changed how we think about our actions." Mr. Harris smiled. "You changed yourselves. I only helped you see it." In the weeks that followed, the impact of that day remained. Students began organizing small acts of kindness, helping others with schoolwork, assisting teachers, and looking out for one another on the playground. Older students started mentoring younger ones, sharing lessons about respect and integrity that they had learned firsthand. The ripple of positive behavior grew steadily, and the culture of the school shifted in a meaningful way. Even the bullies, who had once ruled the playground with teasing and tricks, became role models in their own right. They joined school clubs, helped organize events, and used their energy in constructive ways. The sense of pride and accomplishment they felt from making a positive difference replaced the fleeting thrill they had once found in causing trouble. Over time, the story of Mr. Harris and the attempted prank became a quiet legend at the school. Students would recall it whenever they faced a choice between mischief and kindness, remembering how a calm, patient teacher had turned an embarrassing moment into a life lesson. Parents told their children about the story, emphasizing that real strength and respect were learned not through punishment, but through understanding and guidance. Years later, alumni of the school would return and speak about the impact Mr. Harris had on their lives. They remembered the way he had stood firm yet kind, how he had taught lessons about respect without ever raising his voice, and how he had transformed not just the bullies, but the entire school environment. It was a testament to the power of example, patience, and moral courage. In the end, the incident that had seemed small, a prank meant to trip a teacher, became a turning point. It taught lessons far beyond the playground. It showed students that true strength is moral as well as physical, that patience and guidance can have more impact than anger, and that a single individual, through calm courage and wisdom, can inspire lasting change. Jason, now a different person than he had been that sunny morning, often reflected on the lesson He realized that respect, integrity, and kindness were values worth pursuing every day, and he knew that no matter where life took him, the memory of Mr. Harris and the lesson of that ordinary yet extraordinary encounter would remain with him forever. The playground of Lincoln Middle School returned to its normal rhythms of laughter and games, but now it carried something deeper, a quiet understanding that the choices each student made could create either harm or hope. And thanks to one teacher who stood with dignity, patience, and wisdom, hope had triumphed, leaving a lasting mark on the lives of all who witnessed it.